My guest today at Davos is someone who's been a former investment banker, knew and understood the way markets, financial markets and everything else spoke in that language actually, and then did a big career change. He's now the visiting professor and practice at the London School of Economics. It's my pleasure to welcome back on our show, Lutfey Siddiqi. Thanks very much for being with us. It's been quite a career change for you, has it not?
Yes, but I guess it gives me a bit more space to try and understand what's going on in the world.
So as we try and understand what's going on in the world, none of us really thought that this is going to be the world which is increasingly tougher to understand, whether it's Brexit or whether it's the US presidency, Donald Trump coming in. Many people believe that globalization is in retreat as far as the world over is concerned. Are you someone who shares that view? And if you do, what is the concern that arises out of it?
Yes, I think even if it's not in retreat, certainly the speed with which globalization was marching forward as the unassailable, unambiguously positive thing, that was sort of the Davos consensus, is now certainly challenged. Mm-hmm. There are at least three things happening at the same time. There's a problem with the underlying economics. The global economy, while doing better, is still not growing as strongly as we would have liked to. Mm-hmm. Global trade is not growing as much as we would have liked to. So economics and the economy is the problem. Technology is the big issue, a strong disruptive force, the fourth industrial revolution that everyone talks about over here, and the implications of that are still not fully understood. Right. And the third one, which is perhaps more pressing right now, is what does it mean for the global world order and leadership at various levels, at the country level, at the corporate level, at the individual level.
And which is why there is a discourse around responsive and responsible leadership. I'll just come to that in a bit. But, in a world that's increasingly anti-establishment, more populist, more protectionist, how is the global landscape really held right now in terms of emerging markets? Is it advantaged countries India? Is it disadvantaged countries India? I mean, one is trying to just decipher through the landscape and still not get any answers.
Yes, it's very hard to come up with a static answer that's good for all time. It could be either of two extremes. There are certainly lots of opportunities. Every time an industry, an established way of doing things is disrupted, there is an opportunity for others to come in. At the same time, a prolonged period of disruption, a continuous state of change, uncertainty, that's not good for long-term thinking, long-term planning.
Right.
So, unfortunately, the answer is that one has to stay as nimble and agile as possible and perhaps live with a period of uncertainty for some time to come.
Talking about uncertainty and going back to the point that we discussed earlier, which is leadership at every level, both at the country, the corporate, every level that we can envisage of. The leadership change in the United States, for instance, if Donald Trump's press conference is anything to go by, we are increasingly going to look at a US that's going to be very, very inward-looking, definitely more protectionist. What does the new world order mean under Donald Trump? That's point number one. And point number two is that there are these mixed signals that are coming from people he's elected for or selected for being his cabinet. They are not really sharing his discourse. They're speaking in a different language. Is this a good cop, bad cop that's going to play out eventually?
So the manner in which Donald Trump was elected, the manner in which the Brexit debate and the referendum played out in the UK, they are symptomatic of the fact that perhaps we haven't had enough of a responsive leadership. That consensus we spoke about earlier has perhaps suffocated dissenting voices a bit too much, and so a reaction to that. And so the longer you have unresponsive leadership, the more the chances of irresponsible leadership coming into the void. What it means internationally is that the global order will be much more dispersed. There will be centers of gravity beyond just one, which was the United States for the last 25 years. China is asserting itself. We have Xi Jinping coming here, which is a big headline. But we also have other players coming onto the world stage, including relatively small players. So you see a Bangladesh delegation, for example, this year, which is very strong, represented at various levels. And I think these positive stories will all make themselves felt.
So when you say there will be different pockets of leadership around the world, Donald Trump and all his associates have given Davos a miss. We weren't expecting them to come, and China has a huge delegation here. Do you believe China can fill that vacuum at a global level, at a global landscape?
No, not as a one-for-one substitution. I just think that the first point is it'll be more diffused, it'll be less concentrated. It won't just be one center of gravity, it'll be multiple, which is a different thing to saying that China will simply step into the breach and will have another monolithic world structure. So it'll be more diffused and therefore sometimes a bit more confusing. If you're a smaller country, you probably need to be open to do business with all the powers. You need to be open for capital from all the powers and then see how things go.
So a quick question on Europe before I move on to the larger economic landscape. If you see what happened with Brexit or what happened in the Italian elections, there's this raw nationalism that's really coming to the fore. Will we see many more pockets and instances of that all across Europe?
Yes, unless the establishment reacts differently. One of the issues with globalization or the assumption that globalization is unambiguously good is that we did not listen enough to the losers of globalization. It's no good saying that on a net aggregate basis this has been positive, which it has, but you've got to listen to areas where it has hurt. And in fact, it's been the other way around. In some cases, people are branded racist, xenophobe, or sexist if they come up with a narrative which is slightly different to what we've had. So I think they need to be listened to, and there is a vacuum, and unless the positive forces fill that vacuum, we will see forces of splintering.
So a quick question then on the US, and especially the US Federal Reserve beginning to raise rates now. Do you believe this is going to be the return to normalcy for other global, central bankers as well? There's been this pressure to be populist, to have a stimulus, to have steroids. Do you believe other central bankers can also now wean off the steroids?
With a time lag. So the US is expected to hike. The Fed says they'll hike 3 times. I think it's probably likely to be twice. But the rest of the world will probably continue. ECB, Bank of Japan, China, even though it's not quantitative easing, but the easing process will continue for at least another year, if not 2. It's then a matter of whether structural reforms are kicking in, where fiscal capacity has been created, whether that's been used for investments, infrastructure investments, and so on and so forth. And if real growth picks up, then you're able to step back on monetary policy a little bit.
So away from the monetary policy and onto the big event that happened in India, which was demonetization, and the world took note of this with international media and global opinion makers writing and talking about it. 86% of the currency in circulation was demonetized, was outlawed. I want to pick your brains on asking you a more big picture question. The impact of this on Indian growth, and more importantly, has poor execution perhaps taken the sheen out of what could have perhaps been a game-changing reform?
So from a distance, that's how it looks, that it's poor execution of an idea which longer term is probably going to be positive. It's a good thing if you're able to bring large parts of the informal economy into the formal sector. And that's really the intention behind it. There are certainly long-term... this is the mother of all structural reforms, if you like.
That's
and
right.
if I were a government with some political goodwill, if there was one area that I would have wanted to spend that goodwill on, this is probably one that it would have been the area. No question it's going to have a short-term impact on growth this year, but longer term it's going to be positive.
Indeed. And one last question on the role of the central bank. We talked about the Fed and the Bank of Japan and other banks like that, central bankers like that. But the RBI seems to have been found wanting in this whole exercise. Many people believe, has the RBI let the government infringe upon its own autonomy? It was a very revered central bank across the world. Do you believe some of that credibility has been eroded in this whole exercise?
It doesn't seem to for me from the outside, from a distance. But I think the general point about monetary policy is that monetary authorities had a very strong role to play in the immediate crisis management part of the cycle, and also in helping the initial stimulus for growth to come into effect. I think monetary authorities should step back a little, get off the stage, out of the limelight, and really allow the other actors, mainly the fiscal, the government, the structural side of things, to come to the fore.
Indeed. And on that note, thank you very much for speaking to us. It's been lovely chatting with you at Davos.
Thank you.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.